Hi there, this is Miss Weaver, and this video is going to cover using StatCrunch to display different types of qualitative data. And we're going to look at some raw data as well as summary data. And I will say a lot of your online assignments will probably come from summary data, but I want us to look at both. And just notice that that is a repeat. There we go. So frequency distributions from raw data. If I do have raw data, and I actually have a data set here for us, this is our presidents for the United States all the way through newly elected Joe Biden. And we have lots of different things, their term in office, days in office, state of birth, height in centimeters, age at inauguration, age at death for those that uh, that applies to. So we have some dashes down here for presidents who are still alive. Eye color and dominant hand, whether they're right-handed or left-handed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this different data sets like this to work through these different types of graphs. Now, some of this is qualitative data, so we'll use those for this first video. And some of this is quantitative data, and we'll attack quantitative data displays in the next video. So if I want to make a frequency distribution from raw data, so maybe like state of birth, which states have had or which state has had the most presidents, something like that, then I can go to tables, and I do want to make a frequency table, and I'm going to select state of birth, and I can select as many of these as I want. If I just want a frequency distribution, that's fine. Relative frequency, of course, means that we're going to take each count and divide by the total. Cumulative frequency is summing up for each as we go along, as we go down each line, and then cumulative relative frequency is our sum of our relative frequency. So I'm actually going to select all four. As far as order, we're going to order, in this case, value ascending is just going to put it in alphabetical order. And that's fine, but I do kind of want the one that is the most. So I'm actually going to go with the count descending. And then I'm going to click compute. That's going to give me a huge table because there's been several states represented. Of course, lots of these just have one president from each one. But I can see that Virginia has had the most, but Ohio is a very close second. And I get my frequencies in this first column, relative frequency. So again, I've got my count is 46. So 8 divided by 46, 7 divided by 46, and so on. My cumulative frequencies are here. So of course, my cumulative frequency for the first row will always be the same as the frequency. And I don't know that cumulative frequency really makes sense as far as going here, but the frequency and relative frequency are very helpful. So we do have that information for us. And that's if we have raw data. A lot of times, though, you won't have that raw data. And so if we have something more like, let me scroll over here. So I've got several different, so here's some summary data. I went ahead and found the summary data for eye color. And so if I want to get a relative frequency for eye color, and I don't have the data, so yes, I do in this case have it over in one of the previous columns. But if I only have the summary data, then what I'll have to do to get the relative frequency is almost like a cheat code. I need to go in and kind of do a workaround. And that workaround is going to use the bar plot. And again, we don't have data, we have a summary. And so our categories are going to be in this eye color, and our counts will be in frequency. And then, of course, I don't want a frequency. I don't need the frequencies again. I already have those. I would like the relative frequencies. Now, the big thing is if your data was given to you in a particular order, and in this case, it's just alphabetical, I color alphabetically. But if your online assignment has it in this order, then your relative frequencies that you're going to want to put out, you're going to want them to be in the same order as well. So you want to make sure in order by worksheet, that's just going to keep everything in the same order. And then you can display the value above the bar. That's also helpful. And there's our graph. Now, if for some reason your online assignment is asking for more decimals than just 3 decimal places, you can hover on any of the bars. And as you can see, you actually get the full decimal, maybe not the full decimal, but you get a much longer decimal. So you can round to 4 decimal places if you need to, or whatever it may be. And so you can do that for each and any of those. So that is a relative frequency distribution when you have just, you're starting out with a summary. If you have data, it is actually quite easier to work with, but you still can get those numbers if you are starting off with a summary. All right, so let's see. So we talked about frequency distributions from raw data and relative frequency distributions. So I'm going to put an asterisk to kind of act as a check mark. Relative frequency distributions with summary data. So if we have that summary data, we can still get a relative frequency distribution. Now we saw how to do a bar graph from summary just now, so I'm going to go ahead and mark it off. But what if we wanted a Pareto chart? So remember that a Pareto chart has displays the bars in order from largest frequency to the smallest frequency. That's the only difference between a bar graph and a Pareto chart, or a bar chart and a Pareto chart. And so if I wanted to do that with this one that I was actually just working with, I could actually go back. Let me see here. I can go under options and edit, and I can tell it, instead of ordering by worksheet, so if I'm looking for the graph now, I can say that I want the count descending. Now, if I do value descending, it's going to be in reverse alphabetical order. I don't want that. That's going to change. That's going to put it in order based on the categories. I want it to put it in order based on the frequency. So counts descending. Now, normally that would be a frequency. It doesn't matter, but normally that would be a frequency graph. And when I compute, notice that a significantly more of our presidents have had blue eyes than any of the other colors combined, right? Because, I mean, this would be 15, 16 if it were just other, and 29 have had blue eyes. All right, so there is a Pareto chart. Now, if I was doing this with data instead, I'm going to leave this one up. I'm going to use my actual data of eye color, and let's see, I don't want to group. It should be, let's see, compute. There we go. The only difference is that I don't have my numbers on top, but the graphs look exactly the same. So this one came from my summary. This one came from my data. All right. Let's see. So that kind of takes care of all of those different frequency distributions and graphs. if I want to look at how to do a side-by-side bar graph, well, I have some data here. It's not very much. It's just enough for us to do. This was all that I had, that I was able to find for actual data. And so presidents who serve for 2 terms, how many speeches did they have during their first term versus their second term? And for whatever reason, where I got this data stopped at Bill Clinton's first term, and then didn't have George W. Bush also served 2 terms, and Barack Obama also served 2 terms. They didn't have any information on that. And so I'm not sure why this only stopped after Clinton's first term in office, but since I didn't have something to compare it with, I stopped with just these 4, or excuse me, yes, 4 presidents, but it's enough. It's enough for us to do our side-by-side graph. So if I want to do a side-by-side graph, and I know that you have at least one question that asks you to do this, then we're going to go to graph, but we're actually going to go to chart and columns. We're going to select our columns, and so we're going to scroll down. Speeches, number of speeches first term, number of speeches second term. Those are the 2 columns that I'm comparing. And then I'm going to, my row labels are based on this president, which is right before these. So the president's name is also over here in our data, but I wanted to make sure. So it's these 3 that are considered this table. Now you can do horizontal bars if you want. I prefer vertical, just because it's the way I'm used to creating them, I guess. But just match whatever your online assignment is asking you for. And so if we wanted to compare these, we can say, that for, prior to Nixon, presidents were making more speeches in their first term than in their second term. And then after President Nixon and beyond, and of course, it'd be nice to have President Clinton, President George W. Bush, and President Obama as extra data, but there's definitely more speeches in their second term for both Nixon and Reagan. So that's how we get that graph though. All right, so that takes care of everything except for our pie chart. So I'm gonna mark that one. And for our pie chart, I could make pie charts of lots of different data here. I've got raw data and summary data. When I do pie chart, it gives me the option of both. So for one of them with data, I'm going to do the dominant hand, so right hand versus left hand. And so I'm going to scroll down until I find, there we go, dominant hand. And I'm going to display both the count and percent of total. You don't have to display either one, because when you hover over each pie piece, it will show you. But that's what I'm going to do. And then as far as which order to put it in, since especially in this case, there's only 2 options, it's not really going to matter. So I'm just going to leave that. And I'm going to compute. And notice I see that I have significantly more right-handed presidents than left-handed presidents. But I think we could probably talk about, in general, the general population is about 10% left-handed. So we've almost doubled that with presidents. So that's interesting, I think. Of course, this is not necessarily a random selection of all people, but it is something that we could look at as a comparison. So that would be how we would get a pie chart from our data. We could also get a pie chart, I'm just going to leave this up here, from our summary. So if I do a pie chart with summary data, well, if my categories, I'm going to have to go all the way down to eye color because that's the only one I have summarized. So eye color with our counts are in frequency. And again, I'm just going to leave everything the way it is. I could change this to be worksheet if I want to make sure that it keeps it in the order of the table. But the eye color order doesn't really matter. So maybe out of habit, probably select that. And then when we compute, we see that, uh, of course, it's alphabetical, which is the way our original list was. And it just has each piece. And again, we can hover or we can look over here and see what the numbers are. So that is how we would make a pie chart. And that's pretty much all of our displays for qualitative data. And so in our next video, we'll look at different ways to display data when it's quantitative.